Well, we're back again with another one of Tucson's fabulous real estate agents. Amit Pande is, how long have you been in the business?
Hey, thanks for having me. I've been in the business. This is my fifth year, and I was a public school teacher. So I got my start getting my license, working part-time after school. And then I just started realizing some success in the industry. And then a couple of years ago, I decided to take the full-time leap.
Nice, nice. And we had met for coffee not too long ago, and I was just fascinated because as a newer real estate agent, you'd really gotten involved in the investment community. A lot of times it takes some time for people to get into that area, but I mean, you work with all kinds of buyers and sellers. I understand that, but the fact that you have such a strong niche with investors, I found fascinating. But then you told me your sort of your backstory, and I was like, oh,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. But for me, my whole real estate journey started with, what's called like house hacking. So I bought my first home. I used an FHA loan, put the minimum 3.5% down, and I was 25 back then, and I was, making a very entry level teacher salary. And I bought a 4-bedroom house. I had a lot of space in that house, and I said, well, why don't I rent some rooms out in this house? And that ended up working so well. When I was living in New Mexico, I was able to get really good rents per room, and I was starting to clear over $1,000 a month over my mortgage. It covered my mortgage, it covered my utilities, it covered my house cleaning, and I was still netting 700 to 1,000 over that. So I was able to take that. When you're renting, like that money's all kind of like a wash. You're paying someone else's mortgage. I went from paying $500 a month to someone else to making 700 to 1,000. So that swing was huge. And, take that over a year, and where I was living, I was able to just, a year of that savings was a down payment on a rental property. And then, I just snowballed that and built a little portfolio. So I kind of fell into it from that perspective of, like finding good deals and investment that way.
how was that first year though? I mean, you're living with strangers like that.
Yeah, yeah.
What was that like?
It was fine. I'm pretty particular about who I share my space with. So, I wasn't just finding, random people just to shove someone in my room. I used a website for traveling nurses. So where I lived, there were two big hospitals. So almost all of my housemates were either teachers at the schools like I was, or they were traveling professionals who were typically very neat and clean and respectful of space. And
Probably don't want to be at
yeah, I actually never felt like I lived with anyone, because when they weren't working their 12-hour shifts, they were exploring the
yeah.
Southwest. So I had 4 people in the house, and it never felt like, I would come, no one ever used the living room, no one was ever in the dining room, so I still felt like I had a house to myself.
And did you kind of go into this with a mindset that, hey, this is a way for me to create an investment portfolio, or did you just like, hey, this is a way for me to cover the rent? And
Initially I wasn't thinking about, building a portfolio or anything, but it just so happened, my realtor, kind of suggested that I get my license and look into it. And, he was in a small, like 2-person office. So, once that started, my first deal as a real estate agent was with an investor, and he's like, hey, why can't I do what these people are doing? And again, especially where we were living, it was a lot easier to get your door in. And then if you knew these niches about, well, if I furnish this unit, I can get, twice the rent as if I could, with a long-term tenant. So then those,
because you're dealing with still with traveling nurses and such, right? I mean, because a lot of times furnished apartments, like I've got my own stuff. If you're in a furnished place, I wouldn't want that.
right.
But if you got these traveling nurses or so that are just,
Yeah.
is that what?
Yeah. Yeah. So, they're coming for 3-month contracts, but out there's such a need that some of them end up being long-term tenants. I had several that rented, I have one right now she just told me she's going to extend it for a whole year. So, I'm getting those premium rents, but, it's not, I like it more than Airbnb. Not that there's anything wrong with Airbnb, but, with Airbnb, it's a lot more maintenance. It's like every 2-3 days, someone's coming in and out. You have to get a cleaner. This is a little bit more like, it's a little bit easier to plan for. So it's not as frantic. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one thing about the Airbnb that I always think about. If that's a model for you, it works really well. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to turn this over, get a cleaning service in there. It's like if I could get somebody there for 3, 6, or 9 months,
Right.
and just do that every 3.
It's a good medium. Yeah. Yeah.
So now you started this when you were 25. When did you buy your first investment property then?
It was probably within like a year or two. I can't remember the exact. I had my place for about a year, and then I was able to save. I mean, I had my teacher's salary as well. Not that that was anything fancy back then, but my first rental property was $80,000. There's a 3-bedroom, 2 bath. I still own it. It's probably worth like 120, 130. I forced some appreciation because I did a lot of renovations to it, but I bought that property. I had a tenant who's paying $900 a month on that property. He's been there for 20 years and he has no intention of moving out. So he was already there when I bought the property. He was really worried about having to move out, and I've kept the rent very reasonable for him because he's a really respectful tenant. I mean, a lot of things he'll just take care of himself. Obviously, the big stuff, I put a new roof. We redid the bathrooms and stuff. But that one's been great. I bought that property, and then when rates dropped 3-4 years ago, I did a cash out refinance. Got it. You work with the credit union. I have a 3% interest rate on that property. I pulled about $30,000 in equity out, and my monthly payment actually went down because I went from like a 6% to a 3% loan. So, and then, when you do a cash out refinance, you're aware that you're taking out debt. So it's not a capital gain. So, I was actually able to do that across 3 or 4 properties, and the equity I pulled from those properties, I just used it to buy another house all cash. And then my payments actually went down. They were all going from 5 and 6% rates down to, 3.25% rates. So, yeah,
that's fantastic. And just because you threw out the capital gains comment, make sure you check with you.
Yeah.
It's an advisor.
Yeah.
Because selling of that property could
right. Yeah.
get into that, but at the time, that makes a lot of sense. So how many properties do you have right now?
Yeah, I have like 8 long-term rental, 8 rentals, and I have a couple that I own in a partnership with a friend. And that's a way you can get your foot in the door with investing. But there's pros and cons because you're buying it with someone else. You really have to make sure you're on the same page because
it's a business.
It's a business, yeah. And actually, like sometimes one partner is like, I need the money now. We need to sell it, and if you're not planning on that, and then there's the tax implications when you make sales. So you just have to be a little bit careful and make sure you're aligned on that. But yeah, I have 8 rentals. I have a couple partnerships. One of them, we did a seller financing deal. And that's also something, working with investors, I really like that creative financing aspect of it. We bought a home from a friend of ours, and they did a seller finance at 0% interest. And they said, we want a lump sum once a year of this much and this much down payment. And then we want a balloon payment of this much on the 6th year. And then the home is yours, at this price with no extra interest on it. So that home we're renting out to traveling nurses, and there's a $200,000 home that makes about $4,000 a month. It's just split between. It's basically a duplex. They converted the whole downstairs into a full kitchen, really nice remodel. So we rent it as 2 separate floors, and upstairs we have a consulting company that rents it for their people as they come in and out of town. So they have the upstairs, and I have that travel nurse who has been there for a year downstairs. She's renting the whole place just for herself, and it's doing really well. Yeah, so we have 3 more years on that, and then that'll be fully paid off. So, then we'll have this $200,000 house that we bought for $200,000 because we had no interest on the financing. So, yeah.
So then what got you from, you've got a lot of property in New Mexico. What got you from New Mexico over to Tucson?
Yeah. So, even though I represent my undergraduate institution, I did come to,
we're going to blur.
Yeah, I guess.
I want to tell them that I guess we're going to blur that out right there.
Yeah. I went to U of A for grad school, and I was thinking, when I was teaching, I was thinking about doing something in the medical field. So I went and did my master's in public health here at the School of Public Health. And, I decided, when I was applying for jobs that, I didn't necessarily want to work a desk job. So I went back to teaching. And then a couple years ago, I just felt like socially I wanted to live in a bigger city, because where I was living in New Mexico is a very small, 25,000 person town. And I still love it, and I have a lot of connections there. But, opportunity wise, it was, just felt like it was time. And I'm not a big city person, so I could never live in like a New York or San Francisco where I'm from. But Tucson just felt like a very good medium of like, it has all the amenities of a city, but the pace of life and just like everything just feels a lot more laid back here. And I appreciate that vibe is more with my personality.
How do you feel within the long distance relationship with your rentals?
Well, I have a great property manager, and I think, if you're looking to invest, and I work with a lot of investors in California, they wouldn't think of investing in the Bay Area because it doesn't make sense, from a return perspective, unless you can buy properties with cash. It's you can buy 3 or 4 homes here for the price of, 1 home there. So I work with a lot of investors from out of state in California, New York, Florida. So the key for that is you need to have obviously like a realtor who can help you find those good deals. You want to have good financing options, a lender that kind of can help you, with that, but also a good property manager. So my property manager in Gallup is, if I didn't have my property manager, I would probably have sold all those properties and done a 1031 exchange or something and bought something locally here. But having that peace of mind that, for the small stuff, they don't call me, they're authorized up to like a certain amount to like just take care of small repairs without bugging me, like a toilet issue or whatever. Obviously, if there's a bigger issue, they'll call me and say, how do you want to proceed? We can get quotes for you and work with me on that. So having that property manager, and then I actually do manage my travel nurse stuff myself. Because again, it's not like a thing where I have to be like every couple of days, I have to be like dealing with turnover. There's enough predictability in that I don't mind doing that myself. And I use Airbnb, Furnish Finders, a couple sites to find those leads, and then I just do that one myself.
So I think, as we said at the very beginning, I mean, you cross over so many different intersections because I know you work with first-time home buyers, you work with others, but you have this perspective of how to become a first-time home buyer to investor. And a lot of people talk about how to do that, but I mean, you've talked that, right? You walked that path, so I think that's very comforting for someone to know.
Right.
And I also like the fact that it happened so organically.
Right.
You didn't jump into say, okay, I'm going to attend properties in 10 years. I was going to do what makes sense at the moment. And then you were conservative with your cash, built on that. And I like that flow. Not that you shouldn't have a plan,
right,
but that you didn't sort of put yourself into a tenuous position because you had to get rental properties to meet your goals. I really like that.
Right. And then again, investing is not like, some people think, oh, real estate is like a passive endeavor. And yeah, definitely there's risk to it. And I've gotten in situations where, and that's the lesson that I learned is that, the more properties you have, you need to have a good reserve. And again, you need to have good people on your team, but, you could have 2 or 3 like sewer line issues simultaneously. And that's, you have to have you have to have a good reserve to be able to handle that. So now I'm focusing more on like building that reserve. And, I have a certain number per property that I want to have in reserve just to be able to withstand, what if 5 or 6 properties had a big issue at once. So, you hear a lot about the good side of investing where it's like you have the freedom and, oh, it's so passive. I'm not saying that it's like, like a full-time job, but, you do have to you do want to be checking in with your property manager and making sure that they're helping you preserve the value of the asset and, checking in with them. Hey, can you go inspect this? And winter is coming. Can you make sure there's no issues with the roof or anything like that?
And I know you have a pretty strong portfolio of investors already, but I'm assuming you're still taking on new clients, working with new investors.
Yeah, and I think
first-time home buyers.
Right. Yeah. So, I think, a lot of investors might be thinking, and rates are high right now, there's no getting around that. But, there are opportunities and I've built a bit of a niche with the assumable loans and, we can talk about that. And, there's certain loans that are, assumable, like FHA, VA, USD loans can be assumed. So what that means is that, a buyer, as long as they have enough capital to bridge the difference between what the current seller owes and what the purchase price is, they can basically take over the terms of the seller's loan. So in fact, just yesterday, I got an investor under contract for a 5-year-old property that has a 2.8% interest rate. So, interest rates right now are hovering around 8, so, that savings, you could probably tell better. It's like, that's probably like maybe $1,000 a month, savings on that mortgage payment, with the 2.8 versus an 8. So, if could,
and I think this is a key moment here to understand that having the right real estate partner is critical, because this idea of assumptions, there's a lot of miscommunication about whether an investor can assume some of these loans. And I know you even had issues where you've had to talk to
the VA
directly, because it's possible, but not everyone understands how. And you kind of walk the seller, listing agent, and even their lender sometimes through the process.
Yeah, so we actually have one closing in a couple of days. It's been a very lengthy process. We're about 6 months into it, but that lender just kept waffling back and forth. Oh, well, we don't know if we can do it for an investor. And then we reached out to the local VA office in Phoenix. They did an appeal and they said, yes, you could do it. And so, yeah, it was a lot of navigating and things at that corporate level just move very slowly. So, you just, now that, I have 4 or 5 of those under my belt across a few different loan servicers, I feel a lot more confident. But yeah, you just have to be careful because there are, for the seller, there is a trade-off. If you let an investor assume your VA loan as a seller, you lose that portion of your entitlement. So I feel like some listing agents don't even realize that. So they advertise, great low interest rate, but then when you say, oh, I have an investor, they don't realize that, oh, like my seller might lose this portion of their entitlement. And if they need it, that can burn the seller. So you just want to make sure that everyone's on the same page and do your due diligence up front. But, it can be a very good opportunity.
Yeah, I think the research that you've done, the fact that you've gotten some of these done is critical. We hear a lot about assumable loans. We hear a lot about the benefits, but a lot of it's theory for agents.
Right.
Yours is practice. And I really appreciate.
Right. And that's not just for investors. You can be an owner occupant. Now that broadens your, because then you can look at FHA and USDA loans as well. And I think with owner occupants, and you might speak on this, it's a little bit easier to, let's say there is a big gap in difference, you might be able to get like a second, position mortgage, and then you can work with the loan officer to get that, to bridge that difference. So you're not having to come out with $80,000 or $100,000, difference to assume the loan.
And at that point, we're just doing the math. Does it make more sense to get a new loan for the property or to get a second loan and keep the original?
Right.
There's all kinds of different calculations that go into that, but it creates the flexibility.
Yeah.
Okay. And then as you use the word multiple times, you have the right team in place. It does make everything a little bit easier to navigate because you're all sort of understanding what those hurdles are and how to get around them. So how do people find you? How do they get a hold of you? Do you do social media? Or?
Yeah, I'm not like a huge social media person, but I have an Instagram page and a Facebook page, and if you just search Amit Pande, you'll find my socials. And but yeah, I feel like I really like to work by referral. So it's like I love like people that I've worked with in the past, sharing my information. And but yeah,
Can you put out your email or your phone number? Or
yeah, you have
that too secretive?
Yeah, yeah. I know nothing's secretive in this age. Yeah, you can give me a call at 925-899-3795. Amit.Pande@exprealty.com. And again, if you just search on Facebook or Instagram, my name, my profile should come up.
And are you primarily working in the Southern Arizona region, or do you work in New Mexico?
I do work a little bit in New Mexico. I do a lot of referral business out there now, just because, it's a little bit of a drive. But, if you're looking for investment opportunities out there, it's just, again, it's so much cheaper of a market. Obviously, there's some challenges because a lot of the properties there are usually like 100 years old plus. So, you can get a home for a good price, but you might have to spend some money to kind of, and that's with my rentals. I really focused on disciplining myself with, reinvesting a lot of that cash flow back into the property in the first few years. And it's not fun to not touch that money. It's like, oh, I'm getting this rental income, but it's like, until I have, good roofs in place and the sewer lines are solid and the windows are in good shape, I don't really want to like touch that. But so there's some good opportunities there, and I do still do a little bit of business out there, but yeah, primarily in Southern Arizona. And I do a lot of investments in Marana and Vail, all throughout Tucson.
Well, again, if you're a first-time home buyer, a move-up buyer, an investor, or if you just have kind of thoughts about how to do investing with real estate, I think maybe just a consultation would be worth your time, and see where it goes.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'm happy to always talk to people, and being a teacher, having that education background, I really enjoy that process. And, I don't want anyone to feel like, it is a big purchase. I'm not trying to belittle that, but, it's, if you have a good team, a good loan officer, a good realtor to step you through the process, it doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. That's what we're here for.
Amit, thanks for your time.
Yeah. Hey, thanks.